Hello everyone, and welcome back to our coverage of Amazon's Invincible, based off of the Robert Kirkman series of the same name. This is our 5th episode in the series, so feel free to check out our other videos on Omni-Man, Invincible, Robot, and Battle Beast. There should be a card on screen now if you need help finding them. Today's episode is on a character that grew to be one of the most important, powerful, and unique in the entire series, Samantha Eve Wilkins, otherwise known as Adam Eve. Before we begin, keep in mind that this video is not going to cover every single issue or conversation or event that Eve is involved in, but it will cover the vast majority of the most important elements of her story. Additionally, in order for the story to make the most sense, I may not necessarily cover every event as it occurred exactly in the comics, but rather in a way that presents it most logically. So with that being said, let's begin. Adam Eve's first comic book appearance is in Invincible #2. Eve is first shown as a member of the Teen Team, one of the premier superhero teams on the planet. Mark has a run-in with the team when attempting to foil a robbery committed by the Mauler twins, and shortly after meeting her, Mark learns that Adam Eve was actually a girl that attends his high school named Samantha Eve Wilkins, and the two quickly bond over being superheroes. But before we get into her story with Mark, let's take it back a bit and learn about her true origins. Samantha's story is a bit of a tragedy. She was subject to in utero experiments during her mother's pregnancy and subsequently developed superpowers while in the womb. These experiments were funded by the US government branch known as the Superhuman Development and Research Branch for the purposes of turning Eve into a weapon. During the pregnancy, her mother was shown to emit some of her powers, so the doctor, who was referred to as a sort of spiritual father, Dr. Elias Brandyworth, switched Samantha at birth with another couple who believed that their child died during childbirth. Samantha was taken home by her new adopted family, Betsy Wilkins and Adam Wilkins. Dr. Brandyworth would check in on Samantha over the coming years from a distance, but always was extremely cautious as to not alert anyone of her abilities. These abilities he believed could turn her into a living atom bomb. And throughout her early life development, Samantha showed an extreme level of understanding of atomic science, even being considered a gifted student and admitted to a school for gifted youngsters. However, her gifts seemed to only apply to science and not necessarily other academics. She learned at a young age that she had the ability to rearrange molecules on a subatomic level, meaning essentially she could manipulate matter to her liking. To explain this a bit better, we are shown Samantha turning her chicken dinner into a cheeseburger. But as Samantha grows and practices, she is able to do this with extreme proficiency, and pretty much anything she can think of, she can create. She can see the subatomic structure of any item and rearrange those molecules to turn that into whatever she needs. Despite her father's misgivings, Sam started fighting crime at a young age, forming a rivalry with the villain named Kill Cannon. Her first big crime bust is when she comes face to face with 4 other superpowered children who were holding up a bank as a method by the government to lure Eve out. The unnamed group is composed of other test subjects who had undergone a similar process as Eve, but with much less stellar results. Eve eventually learns during the fight that she cannot rearrange the molecules in living animal tissue or living human beings. This safeguard was put in place as a mental block because Dr. Brandyworth believed that nothing should be that powerful, and it would essentially give Eve the powers of a god. After this event, Samantha is retrieved by a government liaison named Steven Erickson, and she learns that her birth mother didn't actually die. Instead, she was captured and made to produce additional offspring, which created the children we saw during the bank robbery. However, now that Eve had been retrieved, her mother was no longer needed, and Erickson killed her. After a brief altercation, the doctor is shot dead as well, and Eve's mental blocks come undone, and she is able to erase Erickson's memories and incapacitate him, freeing her from being hunted in the future. Eve then goes on to live a semi-normal life, acting as a teen superhero, before meeting a younger Rex Splode, who had been working for the government doing black ops work for a man named Radcliffe. Rex assists her in taking Kill Cannon down, and the two become friends. with Eve offering to let Rex stay at her home. We will cover a lot more of this in detail when we get to Rex's videos. However, just know that Rex ends up on the run from the government after killing a bunch of people and stays with Eve in her bedroom for a period of time. Eventually, Rex and Eve have a showdown with the same man, Steve Erickson, that tried to capture and exploit Eve. Rex and Eve are able to defeat him, and Rex is essentially a free agent. Eve helps him get a costume, they begin dating, and the two begin working with the teen team. Eve continued to work with the teen team and eventually met Mark Grayson one evening when she was out on patrol. As we mentioned earlier, Mark was attempting to stop the Mauler twins, and when the situation was resolved, Mark was offered a spot on the teen team, but he turned it down. At Mark and Eve's high school, students started going missing, and it was uncovered by Robot that their physics teacher, David Hiles, used to be a government contractor who manufactured weapons. And it turns out that his son had killed himself as a result of constant bullying. So to get revenge for his son's death, he started turning popular kids into human bombs. David attempted to kill Mark and Eve by turning himself into a bomb, but Mark flew him to Antarctica and he blew up. Eve continued dating Rex despite growing feelings for Mark until one day when she caught Rex hooking up with fellow teammate Duplicate. Eve dumped Rex and quit the teen team. She continued to fight crime with Mark on the side, but then learns that Mark is dating another girl in her school, Amber Bennett. The teen team is officially disbanded after the Guardians of the Globe were killed by Omni-Man, and after that point, Robot is contracted by Cecil Stedman to rebuild the Guardians, and most of the teen team is selected as candidates. Robot offers Mark and Eve a chance at trying out, but Mark declines due to the stress of his day-to-day life, and Eve just kinda decides not to involve herself at all, flying off angrily, presumably mad about Robot working with Rex. With Mark now dating Amber and Eve being single, she decides to start dating Mark's best friend William as a way to get closer to Mark, but it doesn't work out and they eventually break up. After the group graduates from high school, Eve decides that she wants to do something more with her life and quits being a superhero, and she also hesitates in telling Mark about her actual feelings for him. Eve flies away and moves to Africa to use her powers to provide relief for the underprivileged. Once Mark's girlfriend learns about his secret identity, Mark offers to take her to visit Eve as a way to take a sort of vacation with Amber. Mark, with Amber in tow, visits Eve, who is bummed because she thought it was just going to be her and Mark. Mark ends up having to leave in a hurry when his home is attacked by Angstrom, and Eve is left to bring Amber back. During the battle with Angstrom, Mark is left in an alternate dimension, but is rescued by a much older version of the Guardians of the Globe, who reveal that, without Mark, their Earth goes to crap. Before they return, a much older Adam Eve tells Mark that she has always had feelings for him, but never brought it up, and she wants closure. So she tells him this information as a way of getting that. Eve continues her work in Africa, but eventually comes out of her self-imposed retirement to help Mark and the Guardians repel a Sequid invasion. We will cover this in greater detail when we make our Sequid video, but during that event, there's a simultaneous attack on a nuclear defense silo by the Lizard League. During this attack, Rexplode is nearly killed, and Eve visits him in the hospital, forgiving him for cheating on her with Duplicate. Rex also lets it slide that Amber and Mark had recently broke up. So Mark and Eve confess that they have feelings for one another, but they don't immediately start dating because Mark confesses that he didn't start seriously considering Eve as a love interest until his interaction with her older self. This prompts Eve to return to Africa. However, Mark and Cecil soon come to blows when Mark learns that Cecil has been employing and using former villains that Mark had taken down to help further the goals of the government. After the battle, Eve and Mark embrace, and they begin to really start dating, something that basically continues for the majority of the series in one form or another. After the falling out with Cecil, Eve decides to take her and Mark's relationship to the next level, so to speak, and starts a company called Invincible Incorporated. Eve contracts Mark to protect various businesses, people, and places for certain fees. Mark's first endeavor is to stop a scientist who was working for the Pentagon named Powerplex, who had a grudge with Mark. However, in the process, Powerplex ends up killing his family, only making the grudge worse. The next significant event for Eve comes during the Invincible War, which we discussed in the Invincible episode a bit. In this event, Angstrom again attacks Mark, except this time he decides to use multiple other versions of Mark that he had collected from other dimensions. Eve is able to kill one of the alternate Marks, but another one injures her pretty badly, and she ends up in a coma. She is rushed to the hospital by the main Invincible we all know and love, and is in a coma for the remainder of the event. Directly after the Invincible War ends with Angstrom, another insanely powerful foe comes to Earth, the monstrous Viltrumite known as Conquest, a sadistic older Viltrumite that we cover in great detail during Mark's video. Eve comes out of her coma to see Mark battling Conquest and getting his ass kicked on live TV. Despite being significantly hurt, Eve rushes into battle to help Mark, attempting to trap Conquest in a restraining bubble. Conquest easily breaks it and impales Eve, leaving her for dead. Mark witnesses this and believes Eve has really died, which puts him into a bloodlusted state. However, on her deathbed, Eve's powers kick in and she is fully revived. She also hits Conquest with a massive beam attack that burns off a ton of his skin before she passes out from exhaustion. Mark then headbutts Conquest until he is incapacitated. But unbeknownst to Mark, he survives, which you can learn about in our Invincible video. After the dust settles a bit, Eve and Mark attend the funeral of Rex Splode, who had died during the events of Invincible War. During this time, Eve is able to admit that she did really love Rex, but his death brings closure on their relationship as she realizes that she does really forgive him for what he did. Life then returns to quote-unquote normal, with Eve struggling to make Invincible Incorporated work due to the carnage that unfolded during the Invincible War, and the public's less than stellar opinion of Mark. Eve also notices that her powers are not functioning normally ever since she self-revived, something that would continue for a bit of time. Whenever Eve would use her powers, they would go into flux for a bit of time, but eventually return to normal. It's also during this time that Eve finds out that she is pregnant with Mark's child, but she keeps that information from Mark. The next major arc is the Viltrumite War, which is covered extensively in the Omni-Man and Invincible videos. Mark, Oliver, Nolan, and Alan all leave Earth in order to battle the remaining Viltrumites. During this time, Eve stays home and essentially just worries about Mark the entire time. She hires another hero named Bulletproof to essentially pretend to be Mark for a period of time so that Invincible Inc. didn't completely tank. But they also run into a few working issues as Bulletproof hits on her on and off. It takes Mark almost a year to return to Earth, and when he arrives back, Eve is obviously unhappy with how long he was away, believing that he might have been killed. After an uncomfortable dinner at a mortal's home, Eve confesses to Mark that she had an abortion. Mark was obviously crushed, as he didn't know that she was even pregnant in the first place, but he was also remorseful that he had to put Eve in that position. For a period of time, Eve pretty much plays backup in the series, just kind of offering Mark emotional support, which is great. Various events take place, and a lot of this is covered in our video on Mark, so let's just jump forward a bit here. The two end up moving into the Grayson home, and after spending some time living together, Eve ends up pregnant again. This time she keeps the baby, determined to make it work. Following an event where Dinosaurus ends up unleashing a number of bombs on the planet, Eve is once again left to believe that Mark is dead. However, Mark's death was an elaborate ruse created by Dinosaurus that ultimately proved unnecessary, and when he returned home, Eve is shocked. Eve and Mark also learn that Eve cannot use her powers while she is pregnant, as the stress of using them causes her metabolism to increase drastically, which could end up starving the baby. So life continues like this for a while, and... Wait, hold on. What is that sound? No. God damn it, it's the Angstrom is attacking again alarm. Here we f***ing go. So, Angstrom attacks again and leaves Mark stranded in another dimension. You know, the classic. Except this time, Angstrom takes Eve as a hostage. But the results are drastically different. Instead of battling Angstrom, Eve talks to him. She's able to convince Angstrom that maybe he could have done a lot of good with all of his abilities if he wasn't so focused on killing Mark all the time. Angstrom realizes the error of his ways and attempts to release Mark before he is kidnapped by another version of Mark and taken prisoner in another dimension. Angstrom's attack on Mark and Eve causes Mark to somewhat change his stance on villains. He also decides that he has to find Angstrom and end the threat once and for all. Eve begs him not to do this, telling him that Angstrom really isn't a threat anymore after they had this, heart-to-heart discussion. But Mark doesn't listen. He and Robot end up traveling to an alternate dimension to hunt down and kill Angstrom, but in the process, Mark is double-crossed by Robot and left for dead. And it's months before Mark is able to return back to his dimension, and when he does, Eve is just not having it. Mark learns that Robot told Eve that he died on the mission, and in her mourning period, she stopped eating, almost losing the baby. And she essentially dumps Mark because he didn't listen to her and left her alone, again, for months, again, not knowing if he is dead or alive. Directly after this meeting, Mark is sexually assaulted by a powerful female Viltrumite living on Earth named Anissa, and keeps that information from Eve for a long period of time. Because of what Robot did to Mark, he decides to go after him, but in the process, Robot kills Cecil Stedman along with a bunch of other heroes and villains, and starts the process of taking over the planet in secret. Mark attempts to fight Robot, but his new drones emit a powerful pulse when struck that seriously injure Mark's equilibrium. Mark attempts to escape, returning home, and Robot tracks them, cutting off Eve's leg. Mark rushes Eve to a Viltrumite warship, and she gives birth to a little girl, and the couple name her Terra, reconcile, and then Eve is fitted with a prosthetic leg. Mark eventually tracks down Robot again, but facing the overwhelming force that Robot has, he realizes that he has been outmatched, and he and Eve leave the planet. In Mark's absence, Robot transforms Earth into a utopia. Eve and Mark head to the homeworld of the Coalition of Planets and live there for a while. They get accustomed with being new parents, their marriage suffers a bit on the new planet with their lifestyle being completely new, and Mark eventually confesses to Eve that he was raped by Anissa, something they both struggle with, despite Eve being as supportive as she can. During this time, Mark starts working for Alan as a spy, but on a mission to check out the planet Thraxa, Mark is sucked into the past by an unknown alien entity. And this ends up being world-changing, as when Mark eventually returns, 5 years have passed, and Eve reveals that during the time that Mark was away, she attempted to move on and date someone new, but it didn't end up working. Mark and her embrace and eventually reconcile. They decide to take a family vacation on a distant planet with Eve, Mark, Oliver, and Terra. However, they aren't on this vacation for very long before Thrag and 2 of his half-breed Viltrumite children attack. The resulting battle is extremely brutal, with Thrag killing Oliver and both Mark and Eve suffering fatal attacks. Lying on their deathbeds, Eve's powers kick in once again and revives them both. But she is unable to revive Oliver as he had been dead for too long. After this, Mark and Eve decide to finally make it official and the two get married. Shortly after, the final battle with Thrag is set up. Eve and Mark both survive, and Mark becomes the new leader of the Viltrumites. Mark and Eve's daughter goes on to be a hero, and Eve and Mark learn that Anissa, who had died during the battle with Thrag, had a son named Marky, who becomes the new Invincible of Earth. Eve lives a long and happy life with Mark before dying of old age. Except, psych, she doesn't. Her powers kick in again and revert her body back to how it was when she was significantly younger and in her prime. Eve laughs it off and determines that she is essentially immortal. She continues to rule the Viltrumite Empire alongside Mark for thousands of years, bringing peace and assistance to whoever needs it in the universe. And that is the entire story of the female Dr. Manhattan, Atom Eve. She had a really tough life, but everything worked out in the end, and I absolutely love her character and her entire arc. Thank you for watching, everybody. Remember to like and subscribe. It does really help us out. Also, be sure to comment down below which character you would like a complete breakdown on next. I know there was some context left out of this video, so it's pretty important that you check out our other videos to get the full picture. Thanks again for watching, everyone, and remember the motto, it's Atom Eve over everything, and I'll see you guys next time.